Hey folks, this is Tolly and welcome to some more game dev. Continuing on from where we left off earlier today, we're in stream number 2 of taking a look at some cutscenes, some room stuff, and a little bit of skill tree. It's just adding more content basically at this point, and we are kind of a little bit stumped. We started building out another room here, kind of extending the map out this way, and then we were kind of struggling a little bit to try and figure out, like, where do we go from here? Like, what are our next steps? Like, what are our goals that we're trying to give to the player? Like, we know that you're going to start in this first room and you're going to, like, avoid a slime. You're going to find a trapped adventurer, pick up the first weapon in the form of the sword, and then you're going to fight a couple of slimes. And then eventually move your way up to here, kind of doing a bit of a circle and coming in and finding the adventurer basically gone, assumedly perished because it took you so long to walk all the way around. And that's kind of the main idea we have, is that this is like, you then pick up their mace and the run quote unquote ends. I hadn't quite figured out how that's going to work, although I have an idea that I've been thinking about over dinner, and I think I have a direction. Like, I was pretty lost in the last stream, but I think I know where I want to go. So we have this idea that you get the mace, and then on the next run you can break down this bridge and you can save the adventurer, and then from there you can move forward heading up this way to this room, at which point the map kind of branches and you can go either up here to the left or to the right. And then from this one here, we were thinking about adding a similar kind of stump to knock down as a bridge to let you get over to this area here. And again, we can see all of this laid out in Balsamic. Like, we're kind of thinking about having some of these other rooms. You'll exit up this way, you'll come over this way. This is where I want the chapter to eventually end once you meet all the goals and the requirements. And I feel like it's just a matter of, like, what are in these other rooms. Like, we started to think about this one, and I was originally thinking I would just have 2 slimes in here. And I'm like, well, what makes this room feel different from this room? And, like, maybe not every room needs to be unique, but I would like to have it so each one is, if not teaching the player something, has something new for the player to, like, grapple with, some new information that they can be presented with to change how they, you know, deal with stuff in the world. So the thing I was thinking about is, I think I would like to potentially add a checkpoint at this location. This is something we were starting to think about at the end of the last chapter. And the real epiphany moment, though, was the realization of, like, when I try and test combat in here, which we were kind of setting up a little bit of debug tools so that we could start a run and choose, like, from some debug systems, what abilities to start with. And when we start a new run and we fight these slimes with only bash and slash unlocked, it just genuinely feels like there isn't quite enough to the combat system. So let's ignore defend. Let's assume defend isn't here. Well, at this point, I feel like the only things I can really do is just, like, do the 2 different attacks. And, like, yeah, bash does more damage than slash, and there might be a little bit of, like, a timing mini game that you can do. Like, oh, here I probably don't want to bash because, like, that's gonna get me hit, but maybe it's fine. Like, it actually doesn't really matter. And, like, whether I bashed or slashed first, it didn't make a difference in either of these 2 scenarios because it just didn't change anything. We still got hit once and the enemy still died before it got a chance to hit us a second time. So even though bash does, like, a little bit more damage, it just doesn't, other than, like, the one scenario where bash is going to just do enough damage more to be able to destroy the enemy before they get another attack in, whereas slashing would let them get one more hit. Like, there's, like, one weird edge case there that's hard to describe, but otherwise bash just doing more damage doesn't feel like a decision point, and it just, combat doesn't necessarily feel fun just having those 2 options. And that was, like, kind of the realization I was coming to. And then I was like, but when we add defend, I feel like it starts to create some really interesting moments where we actually decide what we're doing. Because, like, here we can slash and then, like, move away and defend, and then we'll parry the enemy's attack. at which point we can try and get a bash in here, and if the enemy had have done a quick attack, they would have gotten hit in, but because we chose to bash, we were able to kill them before they could attack. So like, it just felt like, even if it didn't actually matter, defend feels like as a player I'm making more decisions than just, do I choose between a heavy or a light attack? And so the realization I was coming to at the end of the last stream was like, maybe if defend is the linchpin, and right now we're giving you the sword, and then here technically I guess we should be calling out that we are giving the bash ability. Maybe it's better to say unlock bash. I guess technically the terminology we're doing here is pick up mace. Like, if these are the two things I start with, it doesn't feel like combat is that engaging. So maybe we should kind of focus on that. Like, rather than solve it, maybe that's okay that until we get defend, the two abilities don't feel that interesting. But when we get defend, maybe that's when bash and slash can start to open up and be like, oh, maybe if I defend now, there might be a good idea to bash later. And I think it's likely that we still need to do more. Like, the bash maybe needs to have like a chance to stun the enemy, but like has some sort of downside. Like, if you get hit while you're charging it and it has a much larger charge time, you can get stunned instead. So like, trying to find the right timing on that would be important. So like, there's stuff like that I think could also help, but it doesn't fundamentally change the fact that defend feels more intuitively interesting than bash and slash. And so I think what I want to do then is I want to change this intro experience so that instead of you getting the mace, knocking over this bridge, and then saving the adventurer, I think what I want is you to be able to knock over the bridge and then die to the boar, which feels wrong to be like, oh, we've gotten here, we get to do this thing where we gain access to help them, and then we just fail. Like, it seems off, but maybe that's the right approach, because then what we can do is say, hey, you're not strong enough to fight this boar. You bash and slash is not enough. You need to find a shield to deal with this enemy. And then that gives us a kind of new goal immediately that the player can go engage with. Now, why do I think checkpoints? I think checkpoints are kind of interesting because if I have to go from here to here and I can't get this shortcut yet because I can't defeat the boar, that means I have to walk all the way around here every single time, which is not what I designed. And I've been thinking about checkpoints a lot, and I think they make a lot of sense here because what can happen is that once you get bash, you can try knocking over the bridge in this area, and we can make it so the boar like basically charges you immediately when you step on this tile, and you will not be able to make it past here without defend. Like, we can make it so that attack is just too much damage unless you heavily over level, in which case, okay, you did it a different way, and that's fine. But primarily we can make it so that just getting this trunk here knocked down, you can't bypass. But if we add another one here, which is what I was already thinking, then the player can gain access to this part of the map only once they've gained access to the mace. So the mace is still giving you something. So by coming here, unlocking this, knocking this over, dying, starting a new run, you can be like, oh yeah, there was another one over here. And as long as we can make it so the player can't walk past this choke point without seeing there was another branch, say here, and they know that they can break this one, hopefully when they walk back around, they'll see it and be like, oh, that's another way I can go now that I have the mace. It's another locked door, quote unquote, that we can now bypass. And then when we get into here, I'm thinking I want to have one of the checkpoints, which is a system we had before we went to this version 3 of the forest. In previous iterations, we had this idea of like moving far enough through that you could reach a checkpoint, and then that checkpoint would make it so that you would be able to start at this new location. What's interesting about this is you can't come backwards through here because we have the log on this side of the river, and so you won't be able to knock it down, because every time you start a new run, regardless of which checkpoint you start at, it'll start at the same moment in time and everything will reset. So this will be reset when you start a new run from this checkpoint. And so now when you start a run here, it's almost like starting in a whole new world. You'll be able to go either south or this kind of north. I guess actually technically this is east or west. I always have the camera turned the wrong way, but regardless, we can go 2 new directions. And I think that opens up the option then for the player to be like, okay, you've got to find defend, and maybe there's another MacGuffin I can come up with that is important. And once you've kind of cleared out part of this area, aka these sections, then we can let you come back here, choose the first checkpoint again, and then actually be able to save the adventurer. From that point, I think it becomes a little bit of a game of I still need to figure out what the game is from that point, where it's going to be save this adventurer while also saving 2 other adventurers in these sections, and it's going to be kind of a hard trial to get to all of those, as well as get to this end point after saving all 3. And I think it's going to require setting up maybe a couple other checkpoints or a couple other shortcuts. But regardless, I think that might just work. So, with all of that being explained, now let's dive into kind of getting the checkpoint set up. So, in here, I need a checkpoint object, which we have not done one of these in a while. So I'm going to go reference in forest Pt.2. Nope. Let's see. Is it forest 001? Yes. This has a interact, and this interact triggers a cutscene. That's pretty much the only data in here that matters. What is this doing? 001 checkpoint. We get a little bit of dialogue. Button press sound. And then we set a flag to say this checkpoint is active. That's it. Okay. And then the actual goddess statue itself, I'm going to assume, yes, is just underneath as a prop. Okay. We can do that. So let's come into here. Let's add a goddess statue prop here. Center. Goddess statue here. And then we'll add an interact. I think this should be underneath here. And we want to make sure we set this. I guess even more user-friendly is probably to make it so the goddess statue is here. And remove it from this one. That way it's actually based off of the interact. And then we can move it around freely without having to change the prop in any of these kind of static locations. That's kind of the better way to do it. Now, the actual trigger, that was this thing. We're going to make a new one rather than building it here. And we're going to do I6 checkpoint We're gonna set the default trigger here. Don't need any required flags at this point. And I guess we can have one dialogue here, which will be hero. And then I don't mind actually just stealing the same text. This will be a medium-sized dialogue, no audio responses, close self after it's done, top center alignment. That seems good. So we'll create that cutscene. That should have got generated here. It did. And then this can be what we trigger on here. We will make sure that that is a non-repeating cutscene, so it'll only happen once. And then the actual sequence itself, I don't think I care so much about the audio press right this second, but I do care about the back end set flag, and we want to make sure we are setting the same flag. Checkpoint 01. And there, that's getting set to complete. To active. We're activating this checkpoint. Okay, fair. Cool. Now let's look at what that checkpoint is doing in the data. So if we look at the checkpoint design data, checkpoint 01 is going to be this one. This will become I6 because that's the map. And then we're going to need a new spawn point, I think, is the other half of this. How did we handle that before? Dungeons, Forest, 001. We had a revive spawn point, which tries to use a lightning enter with the revive entrance. Yeah, that all seems pretty straightforward. And then as of right now, that revive has to be manually placed in the scene, which I hate and I would like to fix at some point, but for the time being, I'm not going to dig into that. And I don't think this has to be under any of these other ones. It just needs to be anywhere in here. And then I think the beam of light does need to be in the same spot. Okay. Cool. And we should be able to test that by making the default spawn point for this room the revive entrance. And we should see the lightning strike. Perfect. Now the question becomes, how do we want to handle enemies in here? Do we want enemies? Probably still. But maybe they don't patrol near your spawn point. They just patrol near the exits. So this one's gonna just go over here, then over here, and then maybe back down to here in a little triangle. So it's gonna wander around here. And then this enemy maybe you just go back and forth between 5 and 7 tile. And where are you currently? 3-9? Back to 3-9. Okay. And then we're going to debug test. What would this be like if we were spawning into this map and everything was already found? See how that looks. So we're starting a new run. And there's a couple of slimes around. And I can kind of avoid them if I want. I think that's okay. Okay, cool. So then, let's revert that before I forget. There is a small bug I'm going to fix while I'm noticing it. When we revived in, the fog didn't appear right away. This is a bug I had solved with first entering rooms via walking in from the edges of the map, but it looks like I have not fixed that same bug on lightning entrance, so we're gonna see if we can quickly find a way to correct that. Entrance is probably the keyword. Enter. Lightning enter scene. Okay. So in here, this is doing some stuff. We want to look at where this is. Oh no, here's what I want. I want to grab this version, reset fog, and apply fog. We want to grab these commands, and we're going to move that into here, and we're going to disable the old tile effect. And hopefully that just works. If it doesn't, I'll dig into it more later off camera, but I think this should be a quick fix. It will reveal everything around the character, which I think I'm okay with. Yeah, and it's very light, but there is a bit of fog in the center that always stays a little bit more low opacity around the player. Okay, perfect. So that is fixed as well. Just subtly adjusting things here. I don't think I want it behind the tree. I don't mind the shadow, actually. And then I think I want to just set these to show meta, generation type, grass, and then regenerate, and then meta type, grass, regenerate, and then generate lock and generate lock. Cool. And then same thing here. I think this spot here, I also want to set this as a grass type and regenerate and lock it. Cool. And that's going to make the statue feel a bit more hidden and overgrown, which I think is what we're going for. Yeah, we might do some sparser grass on the edges. Okay, and then if we hit activate here, that cutscene is also working. There's no indication. Oh, I see why I added the audio. The audio was to say that like something had happened. Okay. That's fine. That's fine. Actually, we should double check to make sure that if we end the run and then go back to the Goddess Realm, this checkpoint is available. So we activated it. It should be unlocked. And when we go to the checkpoint screen, we should be able to choose that as one of our starting points. I got the checkpoint name wrong. Interesting. So the question then becomes, what checkpoint did I just set? We'll look at the design data real quick. Checkpoint flags. Either works. I'm sorry I didn't notice the chat, but I noticed it appear. I noticed Twitch out of the corner of my eye more than YouTube, I guess. But either works. Twitch is fine. Also, hello, Hollow Stan. Words are not my forte. I'm so lost, but I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you stopping in. These dev streams are definitely more for me than for like content, to be perfectly honest. Also, thank you for the hydration. I see that as well. Holstorum. Thank you. Hydrating. Yeah, these dev streams are often more about me being able to focus. I think some people pop in occasionally to ask questions and to be curious about what we're working on, but for the most part, I find when I'm streaming, I'm able to get so much more done, and it kind of holds me accountable. These last few weeks, I've been doing Sunday streams pretty consistently, and that has been really helpful in making sure that I'm constantly focusing and dedicating at least a good few hours on continuing to make progress on the game dev projects, or the infinite retries to defeat the Demon Lord. Okay, so we have this checkpoint. I was double checking to see where this was loading to. It looks like it is the last checkpoint in the list. We're going to change this one here. Actually, I guess what I want to do is I want to change the ID to this one. So I'm going to change it to, for the sake of simplicity, it looks like this is the old checkpoint data. So we're going to grab this ID, and that's what we're going to enable. I think realistically I should make new ones for these new rooms, but that's okay. Here, activate this checkpoint instead. Now we'll see if we can activate this and then start a new run and validate that it's actually launching us here. I need to actually interact. Perfect. And then end the run. We've got double music. Okay, head down here, choose the Eastern Trail, and now this is loading into the correct map. Cool, so that's checkpoints up and running. For a system I haven't worked on in a few months, that wasn't too bad, honestly. Now, what does this look like? We need to set up a bridge here. So we're going to add a similar bridge setup that we have here. We're going to copy this object. This is interactables. We're going to copy this whole section. We're going to drop it here. Drop it under the props, I believe, is where I need to put it. And then we're going to make sure that we hook up the reference mostly on this bridge. We're going to make sure that we point this prop here. We need to regenerate the props here. Good. Now, this needs to trigger a new cutscene. I'm going to... We're in H6. We do not have any cutscenes in H6 yet. But we want to steal this cutscene. So we're going to copy it. We're going to make a new folder. H6. Nope. H6. Paste this cutscene in here. This will become H6 Stump Bridge. And then everything else should remain the same except for this section. So instead of the previous tiles that'll become walkable, it will be 7,9 and then 7,10 and 7,11. So those will now become tiles that the player can walk across. And here we'll add some custom props. We're going to add a test decal, which Drixie will replace later. 5 high, show advanced data, and this needs to have this entity ID so that our cutscene can track it down and turn it on at the right moment. Add custom, same setup. We're going to do a decal, set it to decal, put it 5 pixels up, turn on advanced parameters, and give it Fallen Stump 2. And then under the metadata, because I have not fixed the UI, we also need to make sure that this flag is set correctly. I believe it's going to be the same as the trigger name. This needs to be set to true in order for this to load. By default. Okay, cool. And we need we need to swap this. I'm like, something's not right. Okay, put that there. This needs to become this ID. That's still fine. This needs to be that. Just swapping values. Okay, and then I should be using the list. Okay, cool. I think that is set up correctly, so we should be able to walk up, interact, knock this over. These should turn on, and we should be able to walk across. Let's give that a try. So I am going to need to make sure that our debug settings have it set up so that we can have the mace on by default, because this does require that mace pickup has happened. So we'll make sure that cutscene is set to complete, and then we should be able to walk up and interact. Make sure this is working. It broke. It broke because I forgot to hit this button, which I need to make automatic because I keep forgetting to hit it. But at least today I didn't spend 20 minutes trying to figure out what was broken, and I remembered the button I need to hit. Okay, we'll fight the enemy, get them out of the way. Okay. The only thing I'm not sure on is it looked like the bridge decals were already there by default. They should have been disabled until we did the interact. So I'm just going to try walking up along the river a little more closely and see if we can check whether or not they were spawned already. Okay, so they weren't spawned, but we need to make sure to set the default type to pit. And I think just pit. I actually have to go back to the previous room. How did we do this? Yeah, we set it to pit and walkable, which I think it means in theory if you could get past the one tile with the tree on it, these would always be walkable. Okay, try again here. There might be a bug there, but for the time being, I'm going to ignore it. Okay, the water is now showing correctly. We hit bash, and we'll need to do an animation and create this, make an asset here that actually looks like a fallen tree. Slimes feel way more dangerous. Okay, cool. So in theory, that should be working now. The only other question I have is there a way to sneak by this area of the map without triggering the stump to appear? Like if I try and hug this side of the corner, will I be able to miss the fact that there's this bridge here? So I have to move here. No, even moving here as far away from it as possible, I will see that stump. I won't see the river, but I will see the stump. I think that's fine. Okay. Let's disable the debug here for the mace. You know what? Actually, what I should do is I should make a copy of this. And this can be combat test preset. And then first run preset will have no default abilities and will not have this turned on by default. And then if I want to test combat or check to see if these bridges are working, I can just drag in this one. Otherwise, I can drag in the first run. Okay. And now we have two different debug presets for depending on what we're testing. Sweet. And we have no abilities here. So that is working correctly. The only other thing I want to disable is this shouldn't be on for first run. Let's do a run through of where we're currently at. So we're going to start a new run. Technically, we would have done some stuff with the Demon Lord's Castle. We would have acquired the Omni Weapon, and we're being sent down here. We're going to then start exploring the forest. If we head this way, we're going to find a slime. Hero's going to mention that they don't have a weapon, or he doesn't have a weapon, and move past here. And cross over into the next room. Here we're going to head to past this first log, and then the adventurer is going to be trapped, and there's no way to get across at this time. So we have to leave the map and try and find a different way over. We can get our first weapon. Fight this slime. Head up this way. Another little slime, take it out. Take a little bit more damage. There's another slime there, but I managed to avoid it. Big slime. We gain our first level up of our slash ability. We get beaten up a little bit by this slime, but I don't think it can kill us. Cool. And then we can head down here to try and save the adventurer. But the adventurer is no longer here. The boar is gone, the adventurer is gone. But this will be replaced with a mace. And we will get the adventurer's mace. And Hero will say, if only I was quicker. At this point, I'm thinking I might want to have the run end automatically, because anything you do from this point forwards is kind of not pointless, but like it feels like the end point here is the fact that we failed. And I'm thinking I want to have the goddess maybe intervene and reset you and be like, hey, we can try again. There's a little bit of conflict here with priorities, because we also want to give the player the ability to level up their first few skill points. So we might have to adjust that return dialogue. And then here we can do another run. But we now have slash and bash. Because we have attacks, we can now fight this first slime. Defeat it, and then head over this way. And then the thing I'm thinking about doing here, this is kind of the new idea, is that when we come over here, make it so that the boar changes targets to us, and then charges over and ends up defeating us. Can I even get the boar to hit me now? I can. But it's just not strong enough, and it's going to randomly choose between us and the adventurer stand-in. Yeah, so we need to make it so we need to write some new code so that the enemies prioritize the player over NPCs, or at least I can control that, and we need this boar to defeat us. And so then there's a little bit of dialogue we're going to need about the fact that we're not strong enough to defeat that boar. So we can gain access to the adventurer, but we're not strong enough to actually defeat the boar. We'll have a little dialogue about that, and we'll say we need to explore more of the forest. At which point, the only other option the player has is to defeat this slime again and work their way around. And they have to move all the way back to the first area. I have not been paying attention to chat. Sorry. No need to stop talking. I appreciate the comment. I guess I would ask which series are you the biggest fan of, I guess. Minecraft, like what era specifically of the Tolhi content do you come from? Hopefully I don't die to both of these slimes. No, they're only doing 5 to 6 damage. Yeah, so worst case, I'm going to get low. Oh, I didn't foresee this, actually. Yeah, we can't... Huh. Because we ask you to fight that first slime, or we make it, you know, somewhat appealing to fight that first slime, we end up getting too low on health to fight the second one. So even though we want you to knock over that bridge it's almost too difficult. Interesting. I remember Minecraft whatnot, but I watched until you went silent. It's funny. So I feel there is definitely certain periods of time where I've disappeared, but I've technically been around for most of the time. So I'm curious when exactly the went silent part is. Yeah, because I've been doing some stuff, but um, definitely. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back through like YouTube Studios. I guess technically there was a lot of silence, but there was a lot of live streaming throughout the years too. So the videos section doesn't really show. Yeah, I guess I've been doing live streaming content a lot more since like 2017 era. But even then, you're right that there has definitely been infrequencies. That's fair. There's definitely been years of hiatus, if not multi-year hiatuses. But I do always come back eventually. I just enjoy streaming at some level, and it is a thing that I can't seem to get away from. Okay. So I guess the question is, do I want to remove this enemy slime? Do I want to remove this enemy slime, or do I want the player to get strong enough to be able to deal with it? Let's try a kind of recreation of that scenario. So we're going to do combat test. We're going to have no defend ability. So we're going to go no defend. And we're going to unlock abilities 3 and 4. Let's assume that I managed to unlock 2 nodes. And then do another run and see if we can get to that. Defeat that second green slime. So we fight this first one. Right, we're going to get some initial cutscenes that technically should be set to true, but they shouldn't really affect this test. So we're going to get hit for 13 here. Oh, and because of the green hit from the enemy, we actually get hit twice there. So there is a bit of variability in whether or not the enemy does the quick hits or the heavy attacks. Technically, if they're doing heavy attacks, we're going to have a much easier time getting past that section, because we will take one less hit there. Perfect. I think no matter what, we're always going to get hit once by each of these little slimes, and that's fine. We can get into a bad situation here if we're doing a real run, because we would have potentially revealed both of these slimes, so it is possible to get into combat with both of them at the same time, and we take a little bit more damage. I think the enemy missed there. We need to check on why the miss is not triggering. Oh, there's an error with the hit notification system. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, no. Even if we've unlocked our point, a point of strength and a point in health, we're not quite strong enough to deal with what is essentially 2 green slimes and 3 mini slimes. So weirdly, the correct answer, there is a correct answer, which is to avoid the first slime. Yeah, I mean, I think the 2010 era is a lot of people's like primary, like that's where a lot of the fan base is from. Like the Discord is full of a number of people from that era. I think there's also the XCOM era. There's like a certain era of XCOM too that like there was a lot of viewers from that section. There's also some from like a Bethesda era, whether it's Fallout New Vegas, Oblivion, Skyrim. There's like a certain subset of the fan base from that specific section. But the Minecraft era is like probably the largest, which I think is probably fair because Minecraft I think had the most viewership out of any of the videos. Well, that's not true. Technically, Bully and Spore had like some of the largest numbers or the furthest reach, but I feel like the Bully and Spore videos had a much larger reach without necessarily the same dedicated audience, if that makes sense. I'm not saying that there isn't a fan base for them. Bully and Spore definitely has fans as well, but I do feel like it was probably the largest reaching space, and I feel like it ended up hitting eyes where people were like, who is this? And why am I being recommended it, if that makes any sense? Yeah, so if I avoid the first slime, we can pretty handily get to this point where we could unlock the first checkpoint. Oh, and I put another slime here, right. Okay, so yeah, we're definitely not getting across. So if we didn't have this slime, it's possible that we could get to the checkpoint on the next run after the boar kills us. But the fact that there's a slime that we now are encouraged, quote unquote, to fight kind of puts us in a bad position. So I think what's probably easiest is to have this slime start over here and just patrol back and forth between like 10, 3 and where it's currently standing on 7, 4. That way we can avoid it if we want to and just go to the right and hit that checkpoint. And in some regards, it's almost... Let's debug turn on the whole board just to simulate if we had already walked through this on a previous run. Technically, this is going to put us in a position where if the player knows how much damage these slimes are doing, which is still early in the game, they may not fully have grasped the damage. It does make that enemy a threat, because by the time you'd get to here, you'd be pretty low on health. And we know that you pretty much die from that fight. So, like, going this way almost feels encouraged. That's kind of interesting. It feels a little in the corner, though. I wonder how far over I can move it so that it's still patrolling back and forth here, but doesn't feel so... uninvolved in the scene. Yeah, so we can totally go here and activate this. If we want to go here, then there's a chance the enemy could get a sight on us. It's weird. Maybe the answer is that this whole section needs to be moved down to like here so that we can access it without... Yeah, you know what? I like that more. I think I want to shift this map so that you cross here, and then the slime can still just patrol up this way. So it's still like cutting off this corner, and you still wouldn't be able to bypass it because either of these tiles is going to reveal this spot. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to shift it. Also, you just so happen to be making my dream game. I even have a joke GDD made for a similar game. I'm curious, what specifically is the dream game part of it? Is it the isometric grid? Is it the tactical nature? Is it the lore? I don't know if I've done a good job of explaining the lore today, but it's very much isekai inspired, very anime tropey in a lot of its kind of ideas. Let's go grab... I want to grab this room's floor plan. Let's open that in here. Oh no, not I6, but H6. Drop that in there. We're going to copy it, and we're going to rebuild this. Where'd my map go? Somewhere in here I have a map. Where's my editor? Map tool? Map tool. Okay. So this is the current setup. So we want to bring the floor down to somewhere like here? Is that what we're saying? The bottommost stone across from that. So we want to put the bridge here. So we'll add some floors on this side, and then we'll add some boulders and some stones. Or some, sorry, bushes and some stones. I guess B is not totally like clear because it's boulder, bushes, like there is some overlap there. Okay, we'll do something like that. And this is where we'll have the cross point. Cool. Let's re-download that and regenerate. Sorry, trying to find the file. All right, save that over. Cool. And then we'll come back into here. If we have to regenerate this, is it going to break everything? Let's just try. Yeah, these are not getting cleared correctly. All right, let's clear props. Generate TSV. Oh, did that break my... Oh, it deletes the interactables. Okay. Noted. Yeah, so if we have to re-clear, it breaks stuff. I might need to find a better way of regenerating then. Okay. I'm gonna move this enemy to somewhere like here still. And we're gonna change its patrol path from like 7-4 to like 8-9. That should still stay out of the way of the player. And then we're gonna have to rebuild the bridge again. So copy this. Create a new empty parent. Nope. Create an empty object. Interactables. And then place this here. Right. I'm wondering if these should be decals this time. Oh, I'll be right back, chat. 1 second. All right, we're back. Okay, so I'm wondering if maybe these shouldn't be props, but this whole section should be separated out and just be interactables. That way I can move it without having to lose all the data potentially. Why is that breaking? That's also interesting. It's there, it just can't find it. I guess what's weird is I don't want these to be interactable objects. These would be like floating props, which is a weird concept. I'm behind on chat again. The grid tactical, the resurrection, the roguelike nature, the isekai fits very well with Idle Vision. It's pretty surreal. That's, you know, yeah. I will say that that surprises me because I do feel like I'm doing something that's a bit weird. I find it's hard to find good references. I've been working really hard to try and find things that even feel close. So I'd be curious if you have games in mind that you think are similar to this kind of idea, because I've been struggling a bit to find like good touchstones or like pieces that feel close enough to even be worth like playing. The big difference of mine is though was a charm system. The game was about building a party to save the world. I don't know what your story is. That's fair. The story is still very much in flux, but the primary idea is essentially that Hero is resurrected to this world by the goddess, and you have infinite retries to defeat the demon lord. But essentially the goddess sends you down at a specific moment in time, and when you come down at that moment in time, you have to try and figure out how to stop the demon lord from resurrecting. There's a little bit of 30-second hero in there is a reference, but it's more like narratively driven, and it's less of like, I keep thinking about like Groundhog Day is something that I keep coming back to, this idea of like environmental storytelling, like what I'm trying to do with the very first section with the adventurer, where like you see the adventurer fighting, and when you come back in here the adventurer is gone, and then that's because the adventurer has died essentially. But because you can start a new run like Majora's Mask style from day zero, you can potentially save that adventurer. And so you have to do a series of different things in each chapter to prevent the demon lord from resurrecting, is the broad kind of concept. Yeah, Majora's Mask meets Link to the Past meets roguelike. Yeah, but the roguelike part is kind of the weirdest part of it, because like in some regards that was originally what I was started with as a thought process of like, oh, I could make an isekai type resurrection story where you're constantly like doing these runs. But as I built it up, I built it with this set map idea, this idea that like it's more like Majora's Mask, where each run has a set environment that never changes. And instead of having like, oh, each run you're getting stronger by choosing options and upgrading, it ended up evolving more into like this idea of like, oh, you're upgrading your character in like a skill tree and getting stronger by using your abilities. So the more you use your slash ability, you can upgrade it, and then you gain access to essentially a Final Fantasy X style sphere grid that allows you to upgrade all of your stats essentially. So like you can get some strength, some health, some defense, some speed, and then you can like evolve the skill into its next form, which unlocks like its next grid essentially. And then you get another skill grid that you can work through for this ability. But each time you evolve a skill, it gets like new perks and new bonuses, some of which I'm still figuring out, to be perfectly honest with you. But there's more of this like do a run, improve after the run, and then do another run. So it still has that run-based nature, but less of that roguelike, like get a perk and level up on the run, like Hades. Hades is another example people have told me was very similar, and I went and played Hades, and I was like, yeah, this is basically what I'm trying to do, in some regards. But I feel like the single player nature is the trickiest part of it. Like if I was to make this more like a traditional like Final Fantasy Tactics type team-based game, I feel like I would have a much easier time figuring out some of the gameplay mechanics. But because I'm trying to build it around a single character in a turn-based world, there's just so many like problems that creates that I'm still struggling with, and I'm still trying to find answers for. Yeah, I think like Diablo, Path of Exile are definitely interesting ones. I'll say lately I've been playing NetHack, which is a game from, well, it's been around for 40 years. I don't want to say it's from the 80s because they're continuing to develop it, but I've been looking back at NetHack to try and see like what do like simple dungeon crawl single character experiences, how does that stay engaging, even though you only have a single character you're controlling. Because like I tried playing Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2 for the Game Boy Advance like back in July, and like one of the things I really noticed is that I have this problem where right now you just want to hit A over and over again, and it just starts to feel boring. And when I played Final Fantasy Advance 2, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance 2, I should say, what I found was really with each character I was still hitting the same ability every single time, but because I was being presented with a new character in turn order, it often felt refreshing. So even though the character had an optimal skill that they wanted to use, and I was kind of spamming that skill, because there was always a different character being presented, it meant that I wasn't ever really getting bored. I don't know. I'm just talking. Sorry. I'm still trying to figure it out. I don't know. I've built a lot of mechanics, and we have a lot of stuff that exists. It's now just a matter of like putting it all together in some regards. And it's getting close, but at the same time, there are still major roadblocks, and I am just building and hoping I figure out how to solve them when I get to them. This becomes completed. This becomes a prop, custom, test, decal, advanced parameters, show meta, add requirement flags. This must be completed. Alright, and then I need to find the cutscene for reference for the entity names it's trying to toggle on, which is going to be Fallen Stump Bridge 1 and 2. So that'll be advanced parameters, give it this ID name, advanced parameters, give it this entity ID name. Cool. Yeah, Divinity 2, Divinity Original Sin, I think in some regards Baldur's Gate 3 is also, or like somewhat of a reference in the way that multi-enemy movement happens. I do something similar where each action, if it can be happen simultaneously, does happen simultaneously. So movement between the enemies and the character all happen at the same time. That kind of like breaks up or makes the game feel faster. I'll say like in some regards, I really wanted to try and make something that felt like it was a action game while being turn-based. That also has been maybe a bad direction. That has been a bit of a hurdle as well, to try and figure out where do I lie on like this, trying to make something that feels fast and fluid but also tactical, and it's hard to ride that line. Okay, we got to retest to see whether or not this will still function now that I've rehooked it up again. So let's go back down to here, change our overlay. Oh no, we're still on combat test. So this will have the flag that allows us to interact. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. So you have hit the nail on the head. That is one that I found about a year ago, that I had never really played the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games. But I found that those were very much the reference point in a lot of ways. They feel like maybe the closest, because it is both hitting that old school rogue, traditional roguelike, NetHack, whatever you want to think about, like the old school rogue games, while the like, because a lot of ways Pokemon Mystery Dungeon was based off of those older school experiences, but then like made to be its own thing, but they share a similar kind of like base. Oh, we need to change the cutscene to enable these new positions to be walkable. We also need to change this to be 5 pixels up so that it isn't flat with the water, but actually looks a little bit more like a bridge until Drixie makes the art. This is going to be 11, and everything else remains the same. 11.9, 11.10, and 11.11. Yeah, I've looked at a few of them. The Mystery Dungeon games, the main thing that I think is very similar is that the timer system I came up with for like, you have a set amount of time before you run out, and a run ends and you go back to the Goddess Realm and then you start a new run. That ended up being something I had built before seeing some of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games and realizing, oh, their hunger mechanic is very similar in a lot of ways. Okay, so that looks to be functional. I need to regenerate the floor because these tiles are showing up as white instead of the default brown. Overwrite, and then run this tool here that'll regenerate all the floor tiles. Cool. Yeah. So so that's not a bad thing. It's just that the timer system is very similar to the hunger mechanic. So there is definitely like good references there. But yeah, you said, what did you say up above? You said it's like Majora's Mask meets Link's to the Past meets a roguelike. But I think you could also say it's like Majora's Mask meets Pokemon Mystery Dungeon meets a traditional roguelike. But you could also say it's an isekai that meets like a roguelike run structure with a single player tactical RPG. Like it doesn't really fit into a category in like a way that I think is like clean. Which is why I said when you said you have a similar game, Dream Game, it's like it's a lot of games. But I don't disagree because I feel like probably the base little bits and structures are really cool. It's just trying to find a way to put them together has proved to be very difficult, is what I'll say from my experience. If you were to ever try and build your version, I think that's fair feedback as well. We've seen before too, is that the timer isn't always very clear. We're trying to do this pocket watch thing, but Drixie, which if you haven't been around for a while, Drixie's my wife. I got married a few years back, but Drixie's doing all the pixel art. The pixel art's all done by Drixie. But Drixie's been feeling lately that like, although we thought this was really cool, especially like when we did a Blender animation to create the reference for the pocket watch actually opening, like we were really sold on this as a neat idea. But the more time we spend with it, the more that like Drixie's not totally sold, and it's just so far in the corner. And like we have like this bar that's emptying and the timer's moving, but there's not like a clear connection. Like it only moves when you move, but it doesn't quite like read. And if you look at Majora's Mask, it's like on the center, but I don't know. And then combat is like, I'm trying to do this really weird thing where I'm trying to take a little bit from like Elden Ring and like have this idea of punish windows. So that like enemies have charge times and your abilities have charge times, and you're trying to like weave in your attacks with the enemy's attacks, and trying to time your defensive abilities. I have like a defend that you can parry with if you time the defend to happen on the exact turn that the enemy would attack. So I'm trying to create like this tactical Elden Ring like timing windows without using animations, but just using like turn order, which again is kind of hard to explain. I think Tomb of the Necrodancer is like a more simplified version in some regards, but that's more about playing on the beat, where this is more about trying to make sure that you're always timing your attacks, so that you hit before the enemy hits, or trying to line it up so that you can get like a good, you might want to do a attack that does like 3 pips and then the defend that does 2 if the enemy is doing an attack of 5, but the enemy is doing an attack of 3, you might want to like move and then defend. So like trying to figure out how all of that works is kind of working and is interesting, but again, there's still problems with that mechanically as well. Lots of problems to solve. But it's like that ebb and flow of, do I do this now because maybe the enemy might do something else later? Like here, the enemy's going to hit me, and now I know I'm going to go before the enemy, mostly because right now the player always goes before, but I want to get a speed stat involved so that you can actually like level up your speed, and you might start slower than an enemy but then get faster, which will honestly save you a lot of health if you can like get faster than an enemy, because you might be able to kill them before they get another hit in. But like, yeah, just trying to time it. Yeah, combat is a bit of a game of efficiency, but I think that's true of even like Elden Ring too, is like you're trying to get in and hit with the punish windows while trying to like get away and not overstay and get punished by the enemy for being too greedy, right? Like these are all buzzwords and like punish windows and being greedy, and like all of it really comes back to like fighting game stuff in some regards. It's about like trying to deal with the enemies while trying to get as little hit back as possible. Like really you could think about fighting games and juggling being essentially a game of efficiency as well. Anyways, I'm rambling a little bit, but hopefully that makes some sense. Okay, so now we can get here. This slime still feels like it's owning a good presence or a good chunk of the map. The only thing I might want to change is, instead of having it come down to, what is it going to, 8, 9? I think I might want to have it go up to like 6, 8, so it like goes like more like this diagonal, so it's cutting off this area, whereas right now it feels like it's just walking back and forth a little too straight. But yeah, and like, sorry, just thinking about Elden Ring, the other big thing I want to see if I can make happen is like this idea of like, you can get to an area and see some environmental storytelling of like, oh, there's like a destroyed carriage here, like it's been wrecked by monsters. But then if you come back here earlier, if you can manage to get to that zone earlier in the day, you might be able to see the carriage being attacked and prevent that from happening. I think there's kind of something interesting about like designing levels in such a way that the player first sees the punishment, or not the event, you first see the effect and then you later see the cause. Like, I think if we're playing with time, that becomes a really interesting thing. Oh, those tiles are still not loading. I gotta figure out what's going on there. I think I may have accidentally broke the system that prevents you from walking across that area when I did some pathfinding stuff a little while ago. That is a game I have not thought about in a long time. I do have it. Where is it? Yeah, I have a copy right here in my hand. Did Phantom Hourglass have similar ideas? I don't remember it having similar ideas. Honestly, the thing I remember mostly from Phantom Hourglass is spending like 6 hours trying to figure out how to blow out the candle, and then eventually looking it up online and finding out I just needed to blow into the mic, which was not a feature that was ever used at any point earlier in the game. I was so mad. I think one of the biggest tricks, though, is trying to figure out a way to make sure that the player never feels bored. I think the thing I'm most concerned about is players having to re-walk through maps over and over again, fighting the same enemies, and that's why I'm trying to figure out stuff like shortcuts and like checkpoints so that the player can choose where they spawn on the map, or potentially unlock checkpoints that allow them to skip whole sections. Like that kind of old school Dark Souls 1, you know, open a gate and now you can get past this area, or the Zelda style, like now that you have this ability you can do a thing. I cannot walk past here. Yeah, so there's still a bug. I'm missing something to do with changing spaces. Is it this thing? I gotta do a little bit of digging. What is making it so... background music. Let's go with this one. Something is supposed to be setting it to be walkable permanently. And right now it's only happening during the cutscene that it becomes walkable. But some other feature, tile type, is supposed to be controlling that. It's in the, this, no, it's going to be in the interact data. What is this doing? Is it this thing? What I think you're running into, and it's a wonderful issue to have, but you're creating potentially a Rogue or Dark Souls, a category defining game. Yeah, the problem is that if it just doesn't work, there's this thing where like it's that constant thinking of like, well, no one's ever done something like this before, maybe I'm onto something, but there's oftentimes reasons why these things don't work. But I think the reason I'm able to come to this idea is I started with the concept first. I said, okay, I want to make an isekai game where you are getting resurrected and there's a time loop aspect of like you have to do these runs but with a fixed map. Can I make that work? I want to do it with an isometric grid with turn-based combat. Can I make that work? And then keep this whole idea of like, you know, you doing runs and progressively getting stronger. And like I started with that idea and then tried to build everything out from that central point. And I think there's been some backtracking and some different directions, but slowly making progress. It's also worth noting this is a hobby. It's not a full-time job for me. This is in between normal work stuff. And that's part of the reason the Sunday streams have been so helpful, because I do feel like there are times where I can go like weeks, if not months, without touching any of this code, or thinking about any of these design problems. This is on interact. So this only changes the tile type when you do the interaction, and only for specific types of interaction abilities. Namely, I think the chest-based interacts that I made, which are for looting something. So it's not this tile type. Do I see tile type listed anywhere else in here? It's frustrating because I know that I have solved this, and I had run into the same question mark of like, how am I setting this? And not being able to remember last time I looked into this, but something is supposed to be changing this so that it is not walkable. Let's go look at the source, because when I originally wrote this code and this system, it was in W01, which was like version 2 of this forest. Yeah, I mean, I've technically been working on this for... So we started with a different game that was more like a Final Fantasy explore the whole world genre game. It was more like you had a party, it had pet-based mechanics. It was still isometric in its nature, but it was definitely more of like a traditional RPG. And we spent like 3 years working on that, and then we at some point switched over about 2 years ago onto working onto infinite retries, mostly because I felt like that first game was going to be like a magnum opus. It would take like 10 years to build, and so we wanted to build this game as like a quick and easy, get something out on Steam and figure out how the market worked, rather than devoting all of our time and energy into one game that we, you know, might release and not do well. So we've technically been working on the engine for 5 years. All the tools and the map generation, the prop stuff, getting the pixel art lined up perfectly, all that stuff. But again, as a hobby, so 5 years with, you know, sometimes weeks in between actually touching the code. Path overriding tile. This is what I'm missing. There's another component I need. And this path overriding data thing says if these flags are set. Yeah, when we load a tile, we check to see whether or not that tile has a path or overriding data, and whether or not it has any flags set, and that there's actual flags greater than 0. And then if all those flags are valid, then we set the tile type. Okay, cool. So I just haven't been copying that at all when I started moving this system or started building more of these in the new map. We can use this scene loader, which is faster and easier. So in here, we need to... This is not going to be on that level. It'll be on here. I don't know if it actually matters, but we will do tile type... Tile type... No? Override? Pathing override. I don't know if I like that name now. I wanted to say... yeah, whatever. It's fine. So what is this saying? This is saying that this should be walkable if we enter this scene and this cutscene is set to complete. So if this cutscene is set to complete, this should be walkable. Similarly, this one can have the same spot. If complete, this tile should be walkable and pit, because we want it to render the water. Pathing override. Completed. Walkable and pit. Okay, and then we were seeing a same problem here. This sword tile needs a pathing override for if the sword pickup is completed, then this should be set to walkable. And then here, same idea as the previous one. We're going to do pathing override if this cutscene has been triggered, completed, walkable. Walkable and pit, completed, and last spot. Now, one thing that was weird though is technically we had died and started a new run, and this bridge wasn't reset. I think that's an oversight. That should be relatively straightforward to fix, but will require some amount of work. Because we do have... Yes, okay. So if we bring over our design data from this Excel sheet, we can see that we do have certain events like Adventurer 01 Lost. This metric event, which says when the time passed is greater than 150/151, which I think this could be the same number, but regardless, once time has reached this level, we will set this metric flag to be true. So this flag is checking the time passed metric, and once it reaches this value, this flag is set to complete. And this is what's controlling the adventure and the board disappearing and being replaced with the mace by the time you get around to the other side. But this has a reset event that says on the start of a run, reset this flag back to not active. So I don't do that for the cutscene. Because basically what happens is when we make a cutscene, we also generate a flag at the same time in the back end. We say if this is a cutscene, make a flag that has the exact same name as the cutscene. And then when the cutscene is done, we set that flag to complete. And for non-repeating cutscenes, like this one, you can never trigger this again. And the interact functionality is smart enough to know if you're trying to trigger this interact, but no cutscene would actually be valid from this trigger name, it just doesn't show the interact at all. So we're coming in here, and this flag related to this cutscene is still set, which means that this thing is away, this is gone, but the walkability was broken. So I need to have this cutscene reset when we start a new run. But unlike the design data flags, which I can set a reset event on, the flags for the cutscenes need some sort of metric. So we're going to need a new cutscene sequence metadata variable, which is going to be like reset event, which can be a list. Or if we want to be less flexible, we could just have a tick box on resets per run. And then internally, it just uses the reset event. I'm going to go with the less flexible version for now, which is just a tick box, which will essentially create the flag with the reset event if we've ticked the tick box. And if we need more granularity for when certain events from cutscenes can be reset, we will address that when it comes up. But right now, I think the only spot in the game that we actually do reset flags is just on this backend run start notification. So let's edit script. cutscene metadata. Repeat. Where do I want this to show up in the list? I feel like right under repeat feels right, like having the two bools next to each other. Repeat, and this will be reset on new run, which we will leave false by default, and I will have to go manually set the ones that need it, and we'll update the copy constructor like so. Now the question is, where does this get used? Here. This gets copied into the cutscene design data. Okay. So this cutscene design data object which is going to be here, also needs a bool. And we're going to make sure to name that the same. Oh god, where were we? It doesn't have it. Why doesn't it have it? The main dungeon of Phantom Hourglass was all about time and using it effectively, I just checked, including persistent traps and things, I'm pretty sure. I might have to recheck it out. Again, I have it right here, so it might be something I will put on my list to reference. That's a good show. At the very least, it can't hurt to play more things. Well, that's not entirely true. Sometimes you can definitely get into situations. Oh, it was part of scriptable sequence. I wasn't going to expect that. But you can definitely run into this problem of like playing another new game and being like, oh, this game has a thing. This is the thing I've been missing. And you're constantly just like redesigning the game over and over again based off of the newest thing you've played. That's something I've found I need to be careful about, because it's just you find a new toy and you want to play with it. And sometimes the new idea doesn't always fit well with what you're trying to achieve. Okay, so then what does repeat get used for inside of the cutscene? Okay. What about the actual flag? Don't we generate a flag based off the data? Back in Flag Manager. Generates the flags based off of all the design datas. Okay. So then the question is, how do we do normal flags? We pass in the flag design data into create flag. For this one, we just pass in the ID. And if we just pass in the ID, we just create a generic flag. And I'm going to assume a generic flag doesn't have reset functionality. Does not look like it. Okay, so we might need to make a new type of flag that has the reset functionality. Now, what type? A metric flag. We know metric flags have resets. How is it doing that? How does it reset? On reset. Okay. Where does this come from? Is this just at the top row? Okay. If it has a reset event, it adds it. So it's a metric flag specific thing. So right now, no other type of flag in our game can be reset. That feels wrong. So these are generic flags. So in theory, we could just add a string we're going to kind of break this a little bit, and we're going to see what happens. How badly can I bust it? So instead of this being this reset event, can I actually just do... it had a dot in front of it, which means that it's, yeah, backend state manager will have a reference. Backend state manager dot run start notification. Perfect. So we can just say if the reset on new run is set, add a on reset on start of new run. This is not flexible. You cannot put whatever you want in here. It has to be specifically this value. And then if the current state of this is complete, we don't care about any metric stuff, so we don't need to worry about resetting or resetting up that. Instead, we're just going to set the default flag status. I think we can just do flag status dot not active. Again, we're going to break it a little bit, and then I'm going to figure out what a better way of doing this is. We don't have a title. Yeah, we have no string associated with this. So we can print the ID, but that's not going to help us much because it's been hashed to an integer for quote-unquote efficiency. This is also you not using the Unity engine in this version. Okay, we're just going to get rid of the debug for now. So all right, where is this used again? Oh, found it. Okay. So when we create a flag, just add the reset on new run debug. This system would also need to have that passed in to here. It's going to need to be passed into both versions of this generic flag. I guess I could just make new versions here. Reset on new run. The more code I add, the more I'm like, this feels wrong, but I'm just going to keep building until we figure out whether or not this is correct, and then we can refactor before we check in. Okay. Or not. Maybe this is fine. I mean, I'm not hating the way this is being built. It just feels like a bit of overkill in some spots. Okay, so this is passing in the cutscene design data's reset on new run into this function for the factory. It's creating a new generic flag, which now has, that's not what I meant to click, which now has a setup for if this is a new run, which by default it'll be false, then set up a reset start notification. So this shouldn't affect any of our existing systems. And even the design data is false by default. And the scriptable object, scriptable sequence version is false by default. So that should all be fine. Okay, cool. So we should be able to now click reset on new run. And we should be able to click that on both this version of the stump bridge and this version of the stump bridge. And both of those should now be back to just being a simple stump. When we start new runs. Okay. Actually, relatively easy to test this too. We will want to reparse. So let's check the JSON file real quick. So we're going to check the cutscene design data. We're going to open that in here. And we can see currently it does not have any bools for the new on scene. So we're going to do let's do tools, cutscenes, cutscene parse. And this is going to regenerate all of them. And now they all are set to false. They should all be false. And in fact, if we do run quotation semicolon space true, the only ones set to true are the stump bridges. Okay, cool. So that looks to be set up correctly. Now, if we run this one, walk up, do the interact, because we should be in a debug state where we can do that, walk over, hit the checkpoint, end the run, start from this checkpoint, and then walk back into this room, the stump should be returned to its normal form. Sorry. So we can walk across that, turn off this background, let the game music play, walk back. We should, because of the pathing override, still be able to walk back here. We can. That was broken before. Now we can walk over here, hit the checkpoint. Interact. That should be good. Hit U to debug end the run. Move one tile in order to actually trigger the end. Head back out, start at the second checkpoint, walk back to the other room, and because this is a new run, it should have reset the stump. Oh, magic. Okay, so yeah, that was definitely... Oh, no! Oh, this is what I was concerned about, actually. So I'm defaulting these to walkable right now, but they should actually not be walkable by default. They should be pit by default. And we need to make sure that the cutscene is setting them to walkable and pit. Okay. Oh, that's actually kind of a problem. I guess it only needs to be walkable here from the cutscene point of view, because we've already generated the tile with the water, which is what we needed it to be set to pit for. Yeah, I don't want to get into it, but basically I think this is fine. The more important one is that this one here is set to walkable and pit, so that when we re-enter the room, it renders the water correctly. Okay. Yeah, so I think the only problem here was this shouldn't have been defaulted to walkable. And then we can make the same change over here as well, I think. This can just be pit. This can just be pit. And then the override based off of flags will make it walkable and pit. Okay. And we know that the flag was reset properly because this stump was back to rendering instead of not. Okay, cool. I think that is kind of a weird edge case bug fix, but it is fixed. So where are we at? We have the ability to do a run. We have the ability to grab the mace. We can then come into here. I now need to work on making it so the boar is way more difficult so that it can kill the adventurer immediately. We need to change the AI systems so that we can tell AI to prioritize the player over the NPCs if there are two, because this is the first time we've really been running into this situation. Up until now, it's only ever been the player, so the AI only had to focus on the player. But now that we have both the AI and the NPCs, we need new functionality, which should be pretty straightforward to add. We need to crank up the difficulty. And then once that boar kills me, then we'll try and direct the player to instead come back up this way. Hopefully they see the same stump and realize that they can knock this one over and they'll gain access to checkpoint 2. If they instead head this way head towards either of these two directions, I think I want to have another checkpoint over here, checkpoint 3, which will allow you to start at this location instead. So the player can either find this one or this one. And if you find this one, that'll still shortcut you into being able to come into here more quickly. That should be fine. And this is where I start to let the player branch a little bit. There'll be a couple of overarching goals that they need to achieve in one run, but they'll discover those kind of goals slowly by kind of branching out from different checkpoint locations. And then the thing I'll really have to put my design cap on for is figuring out how the player can start here, get to the adventurer, save the adventurer, save an adventurer number 2 over here, adventurer number 3 over here, and then get to the dungeon, which will be the end of the chapter with all 3 of them. And that'll all need to be done in one chunk of time. We might need to increase the clock as the player goes, or we're going to need to set up some form of like fast travel so that the player can not just have shortcuts, but potentially like the ability to teleport between different spots. Okay, cool. We are at the about end of time here. I feel like before I dig into anything else, it's probably a good spot to call it. As always, or as we have been, I should say, as we've been doing for the last month or so, we will be back next Sunday with another stream from 2 to 4 PST, or from 6 to 8. That is on the Twitch page if you're looking for a schedule, as well as in the Discord. I keep saying I want to do some impromptu streams between during the week. I've not been able to find time for those, but again, Discord is the spot to keep an eye for if I do find that I have time to do something. I don't know, I think that's all the plugs. Yeah. I'm gonna keep doing the game dev thing. For now, though, this is gonna be Tolhi signing out. Later, folks.